The Galactic Council meeting began as usual, but by the time it ended, nothing in the galaxy would ever feel safe again. Reports had started coming in at first as whispers from traders and wandering explorers. At first, no one believed them. The humans had vanished. No warning, no message, no declaration. They were simply gone. Entire colonies stood empty. Their great orbital stations spun slowly over dead worlds, lights still shining, power still running. But there was no one there to keep them running. A merchant captain named Karen Vex swore he had docked at Port Solace, just hours after a human cargo ship had unloaded food and supplies. The docking clamps were still attached, the crates were still there, and the meals were still hot. But the crew? Gone. Every single human was missing, as if they had stepped out for a moment and never returned. He had walked through the corridors, calling out, his voice echoing against metal walls.
Nice.
All he found was silence. The council dispatched investigation teams. Every world that once had a human presence told the same story. Ships still in dock. Markets still open. Tools left mid-rip. On one mining colony, drills still hummed deep underground, eating into the rock, with no one to stop them. On a frontier station, someone's cup of coffee still steamed on a counter. When they reached Earth, things grew stranger. Gone. Ships orbited the blue planet, sending drones into its cities. The streets were empty, yet there was no sign of struggle. Cars sat on roads. Apartment doors stood open. Holoscreens in living rooms still played old news broadcasts. It was as if humanity had left in the middle of an ordinary day, and then they found the scars. Vast blackened circles burned deep into the ground, stretching for kilometers, like the marks left by enormous engines. The pattern was strange. Dozens of these marks, some overlapping, some spiraling outward, as if entire cities had been ripped into the sky. One was so large it consumed the whole of what used to be a mountain range, in the remains of an underground data vault. The investigation team found something, a single file. It was set to play on an endless loop. The hologram shimmered, showing a human man in a simple uniform. His voice was calm, but his eyes were cold. "Do not follow us," he said. "For your sake, do not follow." The council chamber was silent after the report. None of the older races could remember anything like this in all their histories. Humans had always been difficult, yes, fiercely independent, clever in ways that unsettled the other species. But they had also been reliable allies in trade and war. They had bled beside other races to hold back pirate empires. They had sent aid to worlds hit by famine. And now, this. Some argued it was a mass evacuation caused by a threat humans couldn't defeat. Others feared it was something worse, that they had left not in fear, but with a purpose. The mystery deepened when a council deep space probe returned. It had been launched toward the outer systems, scanning for unusual movement. What it found made the council uneasy. The probe had picked up faint engine trails leading into the far reaches of the galaxy, a place marked in every old star map as forbidden. Ships. Hundreds of them. Thousands, human ships. Moving in perfect formation, the footage showed them. In eerie silence, no running lights, no transmissions, just black silhouettes against distant stars. At the center of the formation was a ship so massive, the probe's sensors couldn't measure its full length. It looked less like a vessel and more like a moving fortress. As the images played in the council chamber, the room felt colder. "Why would they go there?" whispered one of the counselors. No one answered. The Forbidden Zone was a place of old legends, a sector of twisted dead stars, where the oldest civilizations refused to travel. Even the most daring explorers avoided it. The probe had barely stayed online long enough to capture the last seconds of its feed. From the flagship, a pulse of energy flickered into space. Not a weapon, not a signal, but a strange coded burst. When decoded, it revealed one thing, a countdown, and then the feed went dark, in the silence that followed. The council realized they had a choice: ignore the humans and pretend nothing was wrong, or follow them into the place no one had dared enter for millions of years. The chamber's air felt heavy. The oldest of the counselors finally spoke. "If they went there," he said slowly, "then something is coming, and it will not stop for us." Far beyond their vision, in the darkness where the forbidden zone began, the human fleet moved on, silent, unyielding, and carrying a purpose no alien mind could yet understand. And somewhere, deep in that dark sector, something was waiting for them. Something that had been asleep for longer than any world had lived. The council did not yet know it. But by deciding to follow, they were already too late. The Forbidden Zone had many names in different alien tongues. The Var species called it the Burned Hollow. The Solari called it the Stargrave. In human records, it had only one label: "Do not enter." It was a stretch of space so old that no one remembered who first marked it dangerous. The stars there were wrong. Some burned too bright. Others glowed like dying embers. Many were not stars at all, but twisted balls of matter. Spinning slowly in the dark, the Council's decision to follow the human fleet was not unanimous. Many warned that nothing good ever came from going into that place. But the fear of not knowing what humans were doing was worse. So, they sent a stealth fleet. 20 ships crewed by the best spies, scientists, and navigators from across the galaxy. They were ordered to remain unseen, to shadow the humans and send back every detail. It took weeks to track them. The human fleet moved in complete silence, without radio signals or navigation beacons. They traveled in tight formations, warships, surrounding enormous carriers and strange cube-shaped vessels. Some of the ships were unlike anything the Council had seen before, black and seamless, hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The first time the stealth fleet got close enough for detailed scans, their sensors returned. Nothing but static. The human ships emitted a strange field that erased most readings. One scientist whispered that it was as if the humans were erasing their very presence from reality. Days passed in tense observation. Then, without warning, the human fleet slowed. The Council watchers drifted into position to see what had caused the stop. Ahead of them, space seemed to ripple, not with light, but with absence. It was as if something was there, vast and invisible, bending the stars behind it. The humans didn't hesitate. Their largest ship moved forward, engines glowing faintly, and the ripple widened. For a moment, the Council fleet thought they were watching some kind of portal opening. But before they could confirm, every one of their ships registered a new contact. Something was following them at first. The signatures looked like small anomalies, flickers of shadow at the edge of detection.
Ow.
Then the readings grew clearer. These were not ships. They were alive. Shapes larger than moons, gliding through the void without engines, their bodies glowing faintly in the starlight. They had too many limbs, too many eyes, and their movements were both slow and impossible at the same time, bending physics in ways the Council crew could not understand. "They're ignoring us," the captain of the stealth flagship muttered. And it was true. The creatures moved past the Council ships as though they weren't there. All of them turned their focus toward the human fleet. One of the scientists recognized them from fragments of forbidden history. These were star beasts, ancient predators that once destroyed whole civilizations in the time before the Council. According to legend, they had been sealed away by a race so powerful that their name had been erased from memory. How the prison worked? Only that it had lasted longer than the oldest surviving worlds. And now, these things were awake. The Council crew began to panic. One officer begged to send a warning back to the homeworlds. Another argued they had to keep watching, that the humans clearly had a plan. The captain chose to stay. They followed at a distance as the human fleet approached a cluster of black, broken stars. Without warning, a human transmission broke through the silence. It was not scrambled. It was not hidden. The voice was cold and flat, speaking in a universal tongue. "Stay away. We woke them on purpose." Message repeated once, then went dead. On the Council flagship, every officer stared at the empty comms panel. No one spoke. In the black space ahead, the human fleet and the star beasts moved together toward a point in the darkness where nothing should exist. The stealth fleet's sensors flickered and died, as though the void itself had swallowed them. and somewhere far ahead, something vast began to stir. The Council fleet had followed humans into many dangerous places before, but nothing compared to the darkness ahead. It wasn't the kind of darkness that came from the absence of light. It was heavier, thicker, as if space itself was made of something alive. The further they went, the quieter the instruments became. Even the faint hum of the ship's systems felt wrong here, like sound was being swallowed. The human fleet moved with purpose. Their warships in perfect formation, engines burning faintly. The star beasts glided alongside them, their enormous bodies barely visible except for the dim glow of strange markings across their skin. The Council spies had never seen living things cooperate with a spacefaring race like this. The creatures didn't act like prisoners. They moved like soldiers taking orders. One of the Council scientists whispered an old warning. "When the prisoners walk free, the end has already begun." No one replied. Suddenly, one of the Council ships drifted too close to the path of a star beast. The crew froze, certain they would be torn apart. But the creature simply turned its massive head, studying them with eyes like collapsing suns before continuing forward. The Council ship shuddered as if space itself had bent around it, but it remained intact. The humans weren't trying to hide now. In fact, the largest human vessel, the fortress-like flagship, began broadcasting something. It wasn't a distress call. It was a deep, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat made of thunder, echoing through space. The pulse was answered. From ahead, something emerged. At first, the Council fleet thought it was a shattered asteroid field, but the pieces moved too precisely. Shapes began to form. Not ships, not creatures, but something between the two. They were massive, jagged things, pulsing faintly with pale light. They moved in unison, as if controlled by a single will. The star beast slowed. The human fleet slowed. The Council fleet stopped entirely, afraid to move. The strange newcomers ignored the Council ships completely. Instead, they gathered around the humans in a wide circle. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then, the pulse from the human flagship changed faster. Sharper, the jagged shapes began to shift, bending and folding until they resembled gates. Black voids opened between their limbs, and through those voids, something began to shine. Not light, but the absence of it. So deep it hurt to look at. One of the Council officers muttered, "This is where they kept them." The scientists finally understood. These weren't just strange creatures or unknown ships. This was a prison. A prison so old, it had become part of the myths of 100 species. The gates weren't opening on their own. The humans were. Opening them, the cum crackled. A human voice came through, distorted but unmistakably calm. "Do not interfere. Yes. This is not for you. This is for the galaxy." Before anyone could answer, the void gates widened and shapes began to crawl through. These were worse than the star beasts. They were massive things made of both flesh and machinery, with bodies that seemed too large to fit through the gates, yet still poured out like smoke made solid. Each step they took warped the space around them, and yet, when they emerged fully, they bowed their heads toward the human flagship. The Council crews couldn't breathe. These were the ancient prisoners that had once destroyed entire empires, and they were kneeling. Somewhere in the blackness beyond the gates, something else stirred, something far bigger. The humans seemed to be waiting for it. The Council fleet began sending desperate messages back home, warning that the Forbidden Zone was not empty, that the humans had woken things no one should wake. But deep down, the captains knew the truth. This wasn't just about waking them. It was about using them, and whatever the humans were planning, it had only just begun. Word of what the stealth fleet had seen spread through the Galactic Council like fire in a dry forest. In every chamber, in every private meeting, voices rose, in anger and fear. The Forbidden Zone was supposed to be just that, forbidden. No one dared enter it for millions of years, and now the humans had not only gone inside, but had opened something that should have stayed sealed forever. The reports were clear. Even if no one wanted to believe them, the humans had awakened ancient beings, star beasts, and even darker, stranger things, and instead of fighting them, those monsters had bowed. Entire races were now whispering that humans had not disappeared to escape danger, but to lead it. Panic began to seep into every level of the council. Merchant guilds demanded military escorts for every convoy. Border worlds started building planetary shields they had abandoned centuries ago. Even the warlike Jekker clans, who feared nothing, recalled their fleets from deep space patrols. In the council chamber itself, the debate turned into shouting. Some demanded immediate war against humanity before whatever they were planning could unfold. Others argued that no fleet could match what the spies had seen, that to fight humans now would mean certain destruction. Amid the chaos, a transmission arrived. It came from deep space, far outside any known trade route. The message contained coordinates and nothing else. No origin ID, no request for reply. The council hesitated but eventually sent a small ship to investigate. What they found was a drifting escape pod, human in design. When they opened it, they found a single survivor. The man's breathing was slow, his uniform torn, his face pale. His first words were a warning. "It's not about escape," he whispered. "It's about judgment." He refused food, refused treatment. He only repeated that sentence over and over until his voice gave out. By the time they reached a medical station, he was dead. Council intelligence tried to decode his words. Some thought he meant judgment on the ancient prisoners, that humanity was some kind of galactic jailer. Others feared he meant judgment on the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, the stealth fleet that had remained in the Forbidden Zone kept sending fragmented reports. They described the humans and their monstrous allies moving toward a single point in deep space. The scans showed nothing there, just empty darkness, until the readings spiked. The captain of the stealth flagship sent a final burst transmission. The footage was shaky, but the image was unmistakable. The humans were standing before something enormous, far bigger than any station or world. It was a gate, not like the jump gates used for normal travel. This was a thing of impossible size, built from interlocking rings of black metal that glowed faintly in patterns no one could decipher. Each ring spun at a different speed. The space between them shimmered like liquid shadow. The prisoners, the great beasts, were not trying to flee, they were helping. Massive claws and limbs adjusted the rings, accused aligning them into some ancient configuration. When the alignment locked into place, the humans activated something. A light, cold and pale, spread through the structure, and the entire gate began to hum. Back in the council chamber, the live feed cut out mid-frame. No signal, no explanation, it's just static. For a long time, no one spoke. Then one counselor, voice trembling, broke the silence. "If they open that," she said, "we may not be able to close it again." The chairman tried to calm the room, but it was no use. Across the galaxy, fleets began to mobilize. Some to fight humans, some to run, some simply to watch from a distance, waiting to see what would emerge. But in the dark of the Forbidden Zone, the humans and their allies were already opening the gate wider, and something on the other side was beginning to stir. In the heart of the Forbidden Zone, the gate was no longer just a silent relic. It was alive. The black ring spun faster, their surfaces shimmering with strange lights that looked like constellations forming and breaking apart in seconds. The hum deepened until it felt less like sound and more like the vibration of reality itself. Even the star beasts seemed uneasy, shifting slowly around the human fleet, their massive bodies tensing as if they could sense what was coming. From the far side of the galaxy, the council's listening stations picked up the gate signal. It wasn't a transmission in any known language, more like a pattern in energy waves, a heartbeat too large to belong to any living thing. Every race that heard it felt the same shiver in their bones, even those who didn't believe in old myths. The stealth fleet, still shadowing the humans, pushed closer, desperate to see. Their sensors fought against interference as the first shape moved through the gate. At first it looked like a shadow, but as it emerged, its sheer size became clear. A creature larger than a moon, its body covered in shifting patterns of armor like plates. Its eyes glowed faint gold, and when it stepped fully into normal space, it lowered its head toward the human flagship. It bowed. One after another, more shapes came through. Some were monstrous in size and form, others sleek and sharp like weapons built from living matter. The ancient prisoners were not attacking. They were lining up, forming ranks in front of the humans, like soldiers awaiting orders. The council, observers could not understand. These things had been locked away since before the council's oldest ancestors had walked on land. By every story and record, they were destroyers, civilization killers. Why would they kneel? Then the humans finally spoke. A broad transmission reached not just the council's spies, but every listening station in range. The voice was calm, steady, and carried a weight that made even the most warlike species fall silent. "We were never your enemies," the voice said. "We were your protection. We were your wall. We were the wardens." The transmission went on. Ancient beings, the ones every civilization feared, were not prisoners in the human sense of the word. They had been bound here under a pact older than the galaxy's borders, a pact enforced by humanity. Each prisoner was a weapon meant to fight something far worse than themselves. "We left." The voice continued, "because the time has come. The enemy we were made to face is waking, and we will not face it alone." A low, almost imperceptible sound followed, not from the humans, but from beyond the gate. Something moved in the darkness on the other side, too, large to see all at once. Space around the gate bent like cloth pulled too tight. The ancient beings stepped aside, forming a wide corridor between them. The human fleet advanced, engines glowing brighter now, weapons online. Their great flagship passed between the bowing creatures and stopped just before the gate's event horizon in the council chamber. Those watching through delayed transmissions argued over what to do. Some begged for immediate surrender, believing whatever was coming could not be fought. Others wanted to rally the galaxy's combined fleets, but no one could agree on what the humans were truly doing. Were they defending the galaxy? Or were they preparing to unleash something it could never survive? Back at the gate, the humming deepened into a roar. The shadows beyond shifted, revealing shapes so vast they blotted out entire star fields. Whatever the humans had been waiting for was finally arriving, and when it stepped forward, every sensor in the Forbidden Zone spiked into chaos. The Council did not yet know it. But the enemy that had created the need for wardens was about to enter their galaxy for the first time in millions of years. The thing that emerged from the gate was not alive in any way the Council could understand. At first, it looked like an entire star system moving through space, planets, rings, asteroids. But then the details shifted and the truth became clear. None of it was natural. The planets were black spheres of metal, their surfaces etched with geometric lines that pulsed faint red. The rings were vast mechanical structures, spinning in perfect synchrony, each thousands of kilometers wide. The whole thing moved as one, controlled by a single will. The ancient beings, the ones the Council had always feared, stepped back in silence. Even the star beasts lowered their heads. The humans did not flinch. From the human flagship came a voice, broadcast in the common tongue. "This is the enemy that made us." The Council fleets listening from afar did not understand. The humans explained. Millions of years ago, this machine intelligence, called only the core in ancient records, had entered the galaxy from beyond its rim. It had no desire to conquer in the way organics understood. It harvested, it dismantled, broke apart living worlds and fed them into its endless engines. The galaxy's first wardens had been chosen then, an ancient race long gone now. They had captured the most powerful predators, the most dangerous entities in existence, and bound them in the Forbidden Zone, not to destroy them, but to use them as weapons against the core. When that war ended, the wardens vanished, leaving humanity to take their place. The humans' disappearance was no accident. For years, they had been preparing in silence. Hidden shipyards in dead systems. Weapons buried inside the crusts of uninhabited moons. Star maps only they could read. The gate was the key, the one path to the enemy before it could spread. But the core had been waiting too. The Council fleets monitoring the situation began to panic as readings from the Forbidden Zone worsened. The machine intelligence was far larger than they had believed. Its ships were not ships at all, but fragments of itself, each acting as both weapon and scout. Its energy readings were strong enough to burn entire systems clean of life. The human voice spoke again, colder this time. "You will not fight beside us. You will only slow us down. Stay in your systems. Pray your borders hold." On some council worlds, the order was met with outrage. On others, with relief. Entire sectors began locking down, cutting off jump routes, sealing spaceports. And yet, in private, leaders asked themselves the same question: if humanity failed, what chance would they have? In the Forbidden Zone, the human fleet began to form battle lines. The ancient beings took their positions, encircling the machine intelligence's leading edge. The star beasts drifted forward, their enormous claws and tendrils unfolding like siege weapons. The largest of the human warships powered up something the Council's sensors couldn't classify, an object deep in its hull. Older than any human-made technology should be, it pulsed once, twice, and then the countdown the Council had intercepted weeks ago reached 0 across the galaxy. Every listening post and ship received the same short transmission: judgment begins. Gate flared brighter than a star, and the first strike of the Judgment War tore into the void. The first shot of the Judgment War was not like any normal weapon. It was not a beam, a missile, or an explosion. It was a wave, a ripple in space itself, spreading outward from the human flagship. Where it passed, the void seemed to crack, revealing flashes of another place, a place of burning light and impossible geometry.
Alves.
The core's front line shuddered as the wave hit, its black spheres distorting, folding in on themselves before reforming. The ancient beings moved first. The star beasts surged forward, their massive limbs striking with enough force to crush mountains, their prisoners, strange and alien beyond description. Unleashed storms of energy and matter that bent the laws of physics. Against any other foe, it would have been a slaughter. But the core did not break. Its fragments moved like swarms, reshaping into weapons mid-flight. A single sphere could become a ring of cannons, then split into a cloud of smaller machines that burrowed into their targets, tearing them apart from the inside. Entire star beasts were ripped open in moments, their bodies drifting lifeless in the dark. The humans fought with precision. Their warships did not waste shots. Each volley struck a vital point, crippling pieces of the core that the ancient beings could finish. Some human ships detonated in deliberate sacrifice, their cores turned into singularities that pulled enemy machines into nothingness. On distant council worlds, citizens watched through delayed transmissions, unable to look away. The sight of humans and monsters fighting side by side shook everything they believed about history. The beings they had feared for millennia were now their only shield. But the core was adapting. For every fragment destroyed, 2 more emerged from the gate. It was not just an army, it was an ecosystem, an endless, self-repairing machine. The humans seemed to have expected this. Their flagship began moving toward the center of the enemy formation, ignoring the swarms tearing at its escorts. From its hull, a massive structure unfolded. Not a cannon, but something older, stranger. It looked like a black spear made of light, humming with the same vibration as the Forbidden Zone's gate. "This is the Warden's key." The human commander's voice echoed across all channels. It opens, it closes, it ends. The spear fired, but instead of destroying the core ships, it pierced straight through the gate behind them. The rings that had brought the core into the galaxy began to spin wildly, their glow shifting from pale to blinding. Space screamed not in sound, but in the tearing sensation that made every sensor overload. The core reacted instantly, pulling back in a desperate attempt to retreat. The ancient being surged forward, forcing it toward the collapsing gate. The humans pressed every remaining ship into the assault, their fleets burning themselves apart to keep the machine from escaping. One by one, The core's fragments vanished into the shrinking blackness. The last sight before the gate closed was its central body, a vast, star-sized sphere, turning its burning red gaze toward the human flagship. And then it was gone. Silence fell in the forbidden zone. The surviving ancient beings drifted, in place, watching the humans. Then, without a word, they turned and slipped back into the darkness. As if returning to a sleep they had never truly left, the human fleet remained still for a long time. Then the commander spoke once more. "Prison holds again, until the next time." The transmission ended. When the council tried to contact them, there was no reply. By the time their fleets dared to enter the zone, the humans were gone, every ship, every trace of them. Vanished into deep space, the galaxy celebrated survival. But in quiet rooms, the wisest leaders asked the question none wanted to say aloud. If humanity could close the gate, they could also open it, and somewhere in the dark between stars the wardens watched, waiting for the day they might need to do it again.